The room is perfectly still, but you can't breathe. The air is thick, suffocating in the aftermath. You brace yourself, waiting for something, an explanation, an apology, a sign. But across from you, they remain locked inside themselves. Head bowed, lips sealed tight. Their gaze is fixed on nothing, lost in a place you cannot reach. This silence between you, it isn't just dead air. It is deafening. Have you ever felt it? The actual weight? Thousands of words are clawing at the back of your throat, raw and begging to be screamed, only to have you force them back down? Swallowing your own truth because it is too massive to carry, but too dangerous to speak? Because here is the reality we need to understand. This quiet, it is not an absence of meaning. It's not that there is nothing to say. It is the exact opposite. This silence is the sound of having too much to express and being utterly terrified to let it go. When someone shuts down like this, it is so easy to misread the situation. Society actually has a very specific name for it: the silent treatment. We are conditioned to view this quiet as a weapon, a calculated move to manipulate, to punish, or to assert control over a situation. To the outside world, this silence looks entirely cold. It looks like arrogance, stubbornness, or worse, complete apathy. It looks like a heavy door being deliberately slammed in your face. And if you are the one on the receiving end, begging for an answer, it feels incredibly unfair. It feels like absolute rejection. But what if we have it all wrong? What if the person sitting across from you, refusing to speak, isn't trying to punish you at all? For someone who carries deep emotional wounds, silence is never an act of war. It is an act of survival. Beneath that frozen, unreachable exterior, there is absolutely no malice. There is only panic. Their silence is not a sword being swung at you. It is the final fragile shield they have left to hide behind. This isn't a strategy or a mind game. It is a system failure. It is the tragic involuntary result of a nervous system that has been pushed so far past its limits, it simply goes on strike. A total shutdown, protecting them from an emotional overload that is just too massive to process. To understand why a person's nervous system would just shut down like that, we have to rewind the tape. We have to look past the adult sitting in front of you and go back to the very beginning. Imagine a household where feelings were treated as an inconvenience, an environment where the emotional air was always heavy, and the reactions of the adults were entirely unpredictable. In this space, picture a young child just trying to navigate the storms of the people raising them. Think about this child trying to explain themselves after a misunderstanding. Instead of being met with patience or a comforting embrace, their words are quickly dismissed. Stop crying, they are told. You are making a big deal out of nothing. Or worse, the very act of speaking up, of trying to show their small, vulnerable heart, is met with an explosive, angry reaction. The tears that were meant to be a plea for connection become the exact reason they are punished harder. Over time, this child's mind does what any smart, adaptable human brain would do. It learns to survive. They internalize a heartbreaking, distorted core belief. They learn a tragic equation. Speaking up equals conflict. Expressing a need equals rejection. If they open their mouth, the situation will only escalate. And even if they try to find the perfect words to explain the ache in their chest, no one is really going to listen anyway. So, they stop trying. They become the good child, the quiet one, the easy one who never causes any trouble. Silence becomes their ultimate safety protocol. When the adults around them rage like a hurricane, the child learns to turn themselves into a stone. Because you cannot hurt a stone. You cannot argue with a shadow. this silence ceases to be just a choice. It becomes the very architecture of their mind. And long after they have left that childhood home, that deeply ingrained survival instinct remains. Those early years of not being heard didn't just leave behind painful memories. They actually rewired the physical pathways of the brain. They carved deep grooves into the nervous system, creating a biological blueprint that makes this person hypersensitive to any hint of conflict today. Fast forward to the present. An argument breaks out. Voices get a little too loud. The energy in the room shifts. To you, it might just be a disagreement. To you, it is a problem that needs to be talked out and solved. But inside their brain, a massive, invisible alarm is going off. This is what psychologists call emotional flooding. Deep inside the brain is a small almond-shaped structure called the amygdala. Think of it as the body's ultimate security system. Its primary job is to scan the environment for danger and keep you alive. But because of those early childhood wounds, their amygdala is operating like a faulty fire alarm. It has lost the ability to tell the difference between a minor relationship disagreement and a life-threatening emotional emergency. The moment it senses danger, the threat of conflict, the fear of being misunderstood, or the risk of rejection, the amygdala hits the panic button. It completely hijacks the brain. The heart starts pounding. Breathing becomes shallow. Muscles tense up in preparation for an impact. When a human being is pushed into this extreme state of survival, the brain instinctively chooses a defense mechanism. You have probably heard of the common ones: fight or flight. Some people fight. They yell, they argue, they go on the offensive. Others flee. They walk out the door and escape the physical space. But there is a third, incredibly powerful response: the freeze response. This is exactly where that profound, frustrating silence comes from. When the brain goes into a deep freeze, it redirects all of its energy away from the parts it deems non-essential for immediate survival. And the first victim of this sudden power redirection is the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is the sophisticated command center right behind your forehead. It is responsible for rational thought, emotional regulation, and, most importantly, for language. When the amygdala takes over, the prefrontal cortex is essentially unplugged. It goes dark. So when they are sitting there, staring blankly at the floor, it is not that they are actively choosing to ignore you. It is that the language centers of their brain have literally been shut down. They are experiencing a temporary, biological inability to articulate their thoughts. They have, in a very real neurological sense, lost their voice. But just because the language center is dark does not mean the mind is quiet. Beneath that frozen exterior is a chaotic, terrifying storm. And this brings us to the deepest, most agonizing layer of the silent treatment: the intense fear of their own suppressed emotions. If you could hear their internal monologue in that moment of silence, you would not hear cold, calculating thoughts. You would hear pure terror. They are paralyzed by a frightening realization: if I open my mouth right now, I am not going to be able to control what comes out. They have been swallowing their pain, their anger, and their grief for so long that it has become a highly pressurized reservoir. They are terrified that if they let even a single word slip through their lips, the dam will entirely break. They fear they will say something incredibly cruel, something they can never take back, something that will destroy the relationship permanently. Or, equally terrifying, they fear they will completely shatter. They fear that if they start crying, they will never be able to stop. They fear collapsing into a million pieces right there on the floor, losing all dignity and control. So, What looks to you like a stubborn refusal to engage is actually an act of desperate containment. They are gripping the steering wheel as hard as they can, trying to keep the car from crashing. They are staying silent to keep their world, and themselves, from violently falling apart. This brings us to the most heartbreaking paradox of all. In their mind, going quiet is an act of preservation. They are choosing silence because they genuinely believe it is the only way to protect you and to protect the relationship from the hurricane raging inside their chest. But here is the tragic irony. The very shield they are using to defend the connection is the exact thing that is destroying it. To the person on the other side, this desperate containment does not feel like protection. It feels like an ice-cold blade. That heavy, impenetrable silence pushes the partner into a deep, agonizing pit of insecurity. It leaves them alone in the dark, desperately wondering what they did wrong to deserve such profound rejection. And what about the person who stays quiet? What is the actual cost of swallowing an entire storm? It is an incredibly lonely place to exist. You are trapped behind a wall of your own making, watching the person you love slip away, but feeling completely paralyzed to stop it. Furthermore, when you refuse to let emotions out, they do not just evaporate. They ferment. That unreleased pain slowly transforms into a quiet, toxic resentment that eats away at the very foundation of the relationship. And often, the body keeps the score. The mind might refuse to speak, but the body will scream. This suppressed emotional energy turns into literal physical pain. It becomes chronic tension in the shoulders, a crushing daily exhaustion, or a heavy, tight ache in the chest that never quite goes away. In their desperate attempt to save the relationship, they end up entirely alone. So, why does this happen? Why is it that the more you plead for an answer, the further they slip away? In relationship psychology, this agonizing dynamic is known as the pursuer and distancer loop. It is a tragic collision between two completely different languages of pain. Let's look at the pursuer first. When a connection feels threatened, the pursuer needs to fix it immediately. They process their anxiety outward. They need sound, they need words, and they need to resolve the conflict right here and right now to feel safe again. To them, silence is terrifying. So, the more anxious they become, the harder and faster they knock on the door. But then we have the distancer, the person locked in silence. Their survival mechanism operates in the exact opposite way. They desperately need space. They need a quiet, unpressured environment for their overwhelmed nervous system to finally cool down. To the distancer, that frantic knocking at the door does not feel like love or concern. It feels like an escalating threat. The louder the pursuer knocks, the more dangerous the environment feels, causing the distancer to retreat even deeper into the darkest corner of their cave. It is a heartbreaking mismatch. One person chases to find safety, while the other hides to find peace. And unless someone steps back and recognizes this biological cycle, the loop will spin endlessly, tearing both people apart. So, how do we break this painful cycle? First, we must remember this fundamental truth. Silence, when someone is hurting, is rarely the absence of love. It is the desperate sign of a heart struggling to find its balance in the middle of a storm. To break the ice, you cannot use force. Instead of demanding an immediate answer from a nervous system that is completely offline, offer a structured timeout. You can simply say, "I care about you. Let's take 30 minutes to just breathe, and then we will try again." This simple boundary gives the distancer the safety they need to cool down, while giving the pursuer the reassurance that the conversation has not been abandoned. If you are the one who tends to go quiet, I want you to truly hear this. You are safe now. The person standing in front of you is not the past. You have the absolute right to take up space, and you have the right to use your voice. And if you are the one waiting on the outside, the next time you are faced with that heavy, frustrating silence, ask yourself, can I find the grace to look past that frozen wall and see the frightened child hiding inside?